calling my best man, God that is a superman, or Dogo that is a shaman, is too pure. He's not a carnal man. He does not go broke like Azaman. The God that has the highest format. If he forgive you, all your sin go format. Is the most famous, even in Ramat. It does not make empty mat. It that make us to lie down in green pasture like a mat. I say, Baba God that is not an omogeto. His grace is sweeter than a Ginomoto. He can give you motto even when you don't play lotto. It make me fear even when I don't take colors. No man can snap in with photo. I say, God that is the highest comrade. He is beautiful without using pomade. You can threaten him even if you carry a grenade. He make demons to tremble, even man-made. His glory is not Abba-made. His grace is not Igbo-made. What a great God is this God. The God of all millennium. He covering not get leakage like aluminium. Now praise is the eat, not be bole. You not be threatened him even if you come from Majegule. Before him, the whole universe they don't bale. I say you not be demolished what he established, even if you be Oshomole. Baba God the answer when we Gadura. It does not die like Yaradua. For him to show, all you need to holla is Allah Deura. He's too gentle, he not the quid de para. I say, God, my way in the journey of life, no matter the kilometer, is our speedometer that help us to cover parameter, even when we don't take action bitter. God that is not on TikTok, yet is thick when he talk. What a great God! What do we give to this God? I suggest we saw him an agbada, but I remembered who can take his measurement. For he's higher than the heavens, what can man do? He's deeper than the ocean, what can man say? He's broader than the universe, what can man think? I suggest we give him a befitting burial when he dies. But I remember he's the immortal with seven spirits, the undeniable deity of eternity. I suggest we buy him a generator. But I remembered so that his light will not go off. But I remembered in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in darkness, and darkness comprehend it not. I suggest we dig him a well so that he will not run out of water. But I remembered they that believe in him, out of their belly shall flow rivers of living water. I suggest we buy pancake and Mary Kay, that he may rob and be beautiful. But I remembered they call him the bright and morning star, the lilies of the valley, the rose of Sharon, the Shekinah glory. What do we give unto this God? I suggest we clothe him with robe, that we befit his majesty. But I remembered he's robed with majesty, clothed with splendor, strengthened with might. I suggest we wash over his throne, that demons may not invade him. But I remembered demons tremble at his presence now. What a mighty God he is. I suggest we declare his glory to the end of the age. But I remembered day upon day utter speech of him, night upon night showeth his knowledge. I suggest we help him carry out his work, that things may not get out of control. But I remembered when God is in control, nothing can be out of control. I suggest we buy him a chariot, that he may not walk on his barefoot. But I remembered he walk upon the wings of the wings, even as a chariot. I suggest we buy him cake for his birthday. But I remembered he's the only God that has no birthday. He began before the world began. He existed before the world existed. I suggest we make for him bread that he may eat. But I remembered he's the only bread of life. I suggest we buy him a curtain that he may use to beautify his kingdom. But I remember the stretch heaven as a curtain. He spread it as a tent to dwell in. I suggest we help him carry out his work that he may not faint. But I remembered he fainted not, neither was he weary. There was no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the strength. To them that are without might, he increases strength. Though the youth may faint, the young man may utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. I suggest we buy Mekusi and and pounded yam that he may eat and be merry. But I remember, it does not need pounded yam to remain the I am that I am. It does not need a goosey to remain the Arusi. I suggest we buy private jet because it travels a lot. But I remembered, it's the omnipotent, omniscience, omnipresent. I suggest we buy Manesi that will comfort him. But I remembered, it's the comforter that does not need comforting. What do we give unto the King of Glory? I joined the universe as I adore him in about 5 languages. I traveled to Edo State. The Benin call him Obanokbe Manitu, the God that plays the drum for the trees and the birds to dance. Obanokbolo se akbolo, the God that is bigger than August. Obanokiome segenoyi, the God that is older than time and season. Obanamaike no muhe, the unsatiable God. Obanoyere yakinzese, the God that uses fire to consume sacrifice. Obanemweifi, the God that cannot be trapped. Obanemomae, the God that does not betray. Obanoriye come and get that bear. He that is mighty behind us. Okemenadaze, my King, the God of riches. Obikiowame, the rock of my household. Obano yohwe sameno yehweni koba. He that uses basket to fetch water to disgrace the bucket. What a great God you are! Oh, Kubolila! Oh, Kenosioriri! Obane metitia enifo! Ukekbeni meyakekbe! The mirror I used to behold myself. Obane soma you wetame! It does not abandon a man in the time of trouble. Obano feno foma! Obano yafe! Who can help me to describe this God? I traveled to Roboland. The Robos call him Governor, the governor of all governors. The God that's no equal. The security that never sleep. He that manufactured the earth upon water. Obiribeku, the iron breaker. The king that crowned himself. I traveled to Isoko, the Isoko Korin. Oh Lori, the Lord of Lords, the God of our gods, the everlasting God, the God, the mighty warrior, the God, the Almighty, the Father of our fathers, the God of thunder. I travel to Iboland, the Igbos call him Obinala Binelu. He that stays in heaven and stays on earth at the same time. Ojeni Kuku, the spirit that moves with the wind. Ofunyo Wanasino, the God your universe adore. Ezudo, the King of peace. Ezei, my best friend. Obato Bioku, the God that enters matter, settles everything. Okunerere, the consuming fire. Onune Kushiterem, the great advocate. Oyerenwanya Gejima, the God that gives twins to bury women. Akobata Oyengbata Woroso, the lion that comes and all the animals take cover. Okenkume, the great healer. Akakbawaragonu, the God that delivers from the verge of death. Otubika Okberazu, the beginning and the end. Oswafyuku, the way maker. Ikekike, the supreme God. What a great God you are. I travel to Kogi. The Kogi is called him Ojo Erere, the God of Nana. Ojo Kiashogakpa, the God that healeth. Ojo Nale, the God of yesterday. Ojo Begbele, the everlasting God. Olegbiti, Ojo Akabale Kiashabale, Ojo Akbabanakbai Omamaya, the God of thunder and the storm. Ojo Kiarikuta, the God that regulates time and season. Ojo Enwuntito, the God of new things. I travel to Yoruba. The Yorubas call him Akbata Yeraye, the rock of ages. The one that is plenty without end. Omorontomo Nueni Yokbata, the unknowing. Akinlojuogu, the Almighty. Adumbari, the one that is worthy to be journeyed with. Adun Farolo, Akmalato Sole Ayero, the pillar that holds the universe. Eleruniyo, the God that is fearful in praises. Ologoninu Mimo, the God that is glorious in holiness. Ọlọ́run àjùlọ is above all. Balogunile, Baloguloko is the warrior in the house, warrior outside the house. Awuwo ma ṣẹgbẹ́ ènìyàn, Ògbẹ́nu Wúndí Aṣọlá, Ògbẹ́nu Adélébọ̀ Ṣògo, he that dwells in the womb of a virgin, and glory shine forth. What a great God!